Welcome everyone on YouTube channel KSDU Media. My name is Dmytro Pustovit and my guest for today is Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, a retired United States Army officer who served as Commandant General of United States Army in Europe. Hello, sir.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see you, and I'm really glad that you have found some time to talk to us, because your opinion is extremely important and interesting for us and our audience.
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Okay, so we had a different plan for our conversation, but we found out latest news about Kursk. So yesterday, the local Telegram publics started saying that Ukraine offensive has started again in Kursk region, and today the Institute Study of War said that Ukrainian armed forces advanced 5 kilometers in the Kursk region. Is it possible to predict or to understand how far Ukrainian armed forces could advance this time? And if yes, how do you understand that?
Well, of course, I'm not going to predict anything, but I will say that I continue to be impressed with the general staff and Ukrainian soldiers that are fighting in the Kursk direction. Remember, this counteroffensive first began back in August, and since then they have continued to control terrain inside Kursk, inside the Russian Federation. They continue to draw away Russian troops that would be needed in other places, and they create a real dilemma for the Kremlin when it comes to possible negotiations or securing its own border. I mean, it changes the whole narrative of the war, and that somehow Russia is invincible. Obviously, that's not the case. I think that Ukrainian armed forces will continue to do this as long as it has value. So it's not, the key thing is not how far can they go. The key thing is how much trouble do they cause for the Kremlin, and how many Russian troops do they attract that are not used somewhere else.
Can we see or can we understand how exactly how many Russian troops are now in Kursk region to stop the Ukrainian offensive?
Well, I think President Zelenskyy made a comment yesterday or something, and he said something about 60,000 Russian troops. He would know better than me. I think it's probably difficult to know exactly how many are being used, how many have been diverted. And it also reminds us that Russia's command structure for this is still awkward. You have competition between FSB and the general staff. They hate each other, which is a good thing for Ukraine, of course. And so it's not clear to me who really has the responsibility for organizing the resistance, for getting reinforcements, for coordinating artillery and rockets against Ukrainian forces inside Kursk.
Okay, so a little bit more on Kursk situation. So if we can call it so, yesterday on 6th of February was a 6-month anniversary of Kursk operation, as we call it here in Ukraine. Why is it so important that Ukrainian armed forces are still in Kursk, that they broke the I just lost the word. Broke the. Yeah, I just totally lost the word. That they break in and still staying on the enemy's territory. Is it important because now we are fighting on both Ukrainian and Russian territory, or it important because it shows that Russia is not that tough?
Well, I think all of that is true. the the decision to accept some risk in the Prokrovsk direction, so that Ukraine could have enough forces to launch a counteroffensive into Kursk, to me, is one of the smartest things I've seen the whole war. This was a bold move, but it was also a prudent risk, because I think the General Staff could see that even though Russia had huge advantage of numbers, they really could not overrun or break through Ukrainian defenses out in the east. They could only pound away and try to overwhelm, but they don't have the ability to break through. And I think the General Staff saw that they could take risks there. Of course, it's terrible if you're a soldier on the east there. It's very difficult. But if you can step back from the map and think strategically, this was a very good decision, in my view, to launch this counteroffensive. And here we are after 6 months. Russia has not been able to eliminate this Ukrainian bridgehead inside Russia. I mean, that's incredible failure by the Russians, and it also reflects their continued problems with command and control, who's responsible for what, and it continues to create a problem for the Kremlin, in that do they focus effort to eliminate it, which would take pressure off of the Prokrovsk, or do they ignore it, which will be a real problem for them as we have the possibility of negotiations. So I think, and it's embarrassing. I mean, there's got to be some pressure on Vladimir Putin, I would imagine, from people who are, you can't hide this from the public, I don't think.
Well, you mentioned Pokrovsk, and according to Deep State map, they're about 10 or something kilometers from Dnipropetrovsk region, which is next to Donetsk region. And for me, as not a military or war expert, it caused a dilemma. Did it worth it that Russians are really close to Dnipropetrovsk region, and if they will be able to advance, it means that the war and the Russian troops will be on one more Ukrainian region. So did Kursk operation worth it?
Well, only the General Staff and the President can make that determination of whether it's worth it. But, this war is not going to be won because of a few villages. All right. It's going to be won or lost because based on, does Putin believe he's going to win or not? Okay. And as long as he thinks that he's going to get some kind of negotiated outcome that's advantage to Russia, and that the U.S. is anxious to turn its back on Ukraine and go do something else, then he will keep doing it. He doesn't care how many casualties he has, obviously. But if he sees that the West is committed, that Ukraine is still occupying part of Russia, and that his own forces, even after 800,000 casualties, cannot overrun Ukrainian defenders and break through the way their grandfathers did against the German Wehrmacht.
Yeah.
They can't do that. So I think, it's not for me to determine if it's worth it, but I completely support the idea of doing this.
So the more territory armed forces of Ukraine will be able to hold or occupy, the less Putin gonna believe that he can win the war.
Well, I think that's part of it, but it really, the real determining factor for Putin is inside his head of whether or not the West is committed to helping Ukraine, or is the West anxious to end it? And I think right now he's probably thinking, okay, the Trump administration is so anxious to get a negotiated settlement that Putin that this probably, well, we'll have to see how the negotiations go. I don't want to predict how they go, but I would expect that any negotiation that does not include President Zelenskyy is doomed to failure. Ukraine would not accept that, nor should they. But also the Europeans. The Europeans are going to have to deal with the consequences of whatever the negotiated outcome is. They have an interest, and they should not be on the sidelines for this either. This should not be, in my view, something between Trump and Putin.
Yeah, we're getting closer to a negotiation process, which will happen one way or another, one day or another. And Ukraine awaits a visit from the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, in February. This was reported by the head of the presidential office, Andriy Yermak. What should we expect from his visit to Ukraine?
Well, what I have read about General Kellogg's visit is that he wants to be able to look Ukrainian leadership in the eye and get a good understanding of what they are willing to do and not willing to do, what's most important. And I think that will be important for him to truly understand exactly what Ukrainian leadership is prepared to do. What are the priorities for the Ukrainian government? That would be important as he prepares for possible negotiations in the coming months, and of course as he has his calls. What I hope is that that in his visit he realizes that it would be a mistake for Ukraine to try and have an election as one of the conditions. That to me, that's a Kremlin talking point. That's what the Kremlin wants, because they want to delegitimize the government of Ukraine. And so I hope that they will make it very clear that Ukraine is prepared to keep fighting, that stopping the fighting is not the priority. There are worse things than fighting. Living in a place where the Red Army shows up, that's worse than continuing to fight. And so I hope that they will make it clear to General Kellogg what Ukraine is capable of doing, what it's prepared to do, and what it expects. That if the United States doesn't do it, that Ukraine has other partners that will help in terms of its defense and its security.
Lately, you said that one of the most important things is that General Kellogg acknowledged that Russia cannot be trusted. You cannot trust Russia under any circumstances. So my question would be, how can you make a deal with someone whom you cannot trust, especially a peace deal?
Well, the only way you can do that is through a very strict and strong verification process and compliance measures. So that means if there's an agreement with Russia on some kind of a zone of separation, for example, something like that, that means you have to have real troops that are there that are capable of deterring Russia from violating any agreement, and they should have the rules of engagement that allow them to punch back immediately when Russia tests the agreement, which they will do within the first 24 hours, I'm sure. So whoever is there as a peacekeeping force or a peace enforcement or agreement implementation force needs to have a very clear mission and the ability to strike immediately. If they don't, then we will end up with the same disastrous outcome as Minsk I and Minsk II. So that's the answer to your question, is that there has to be something that will force Russia to comply. And perhaps that could, Trump already has huge leverage over Putin. much stronger than he did 4 years ago or 8 years ago, in terms of the ability to put crippling sanctions on Russia over their oil, or to allow Ukraine to open up the gates and allow Ukraine to have everything. These are all things that Trump could tell Putin, say, look, if you violate, here comes another 500 ATACMS.
Yeah.
And here comes another $1 billion, things that have already been authorized and appropriated by the Congress, but never got delivered under Biden. It's there. So Trump can always say, okay, if you violate, I'm going to release all this. So there is leverage that he would have. So it is important that General Kellogg, even if I don't agree with all that he says, that he acknowledges you cannot trust Russia. That is an excellent starting point for negotiating with the Russians.
Okay, let's imagine that we have some sort of agreement and some sort of a peace deal with Russian Federation, and we agreed that devastating measures will be taken if they violate any of the peace agreement or peace deal. But if I were Russia, I wouldn't believe anybody who tells me that if I violate something, I'll be punished in any way, or some strong measures will be used against me, because to be honest, no one does anything to destroy Russia. Those sanctions, they do work, but not as fast, and they are not that devastating as President Biden talked about them. So maybe the good idea or the good option or one of the options would be to give Ukraine something right now, something to show Russia that all the rest of the world is not joking with Russia anymore.
Well, I don't disagree with that. But you are correct that the Russians right now don't believe that we'll actually do anything, because we haven't really done anything for the last 15 years. That's why we have a war now, because we didn't do anything meaningful against them. So I hope that the Trump administration plus the Europeans,
yes,
will make this clear. And this is why it cannot be just the U.S. and Russia. It needs to have Ukraine, Poland, Germany, France, UK, all of these nations involved with putting pressure on the Kremlin to live up to whatever agreement is struck. Otherwise, they should pay huge consequences on the battlefield and also economically.
So what could it be? 500 ATACMS or 150 jets, fighter jets, or nuclear weapon? What can?
No,
yeah.
As I've already said, he could just allow what's already been approved. There's like $3 billion worth of aid that was approved but not delivered yet. He could say he doesn't have to do anything. He could just let it go. Or he could tighten down on the sanctions that Biden put in place right at the very end of his term, or he could lift all restrictions on anything that has been provided, that Ukraine can use whatever they want, however they want. I mean, these are things, those would be the easiest things to do that are already in place. Just allow them to be executed.
Okay, so if we speaking about the war and something that could threat Russia, foreign troops in Ukraine fighting against Russian Federation army could be the good way to clarify everything between Russia and Ukraine's ally.
Well, I think that President Zelenskyy is not asking for foreign troops in the war, but if there is going to be some kind of a peace settlement of some sort, then they will have to have an enforcement force that will be there to keep it in place. Not just observers like we had before, but real soldiers that could inflict pain. That, that would have to include soldiers from Europe, and I believe from Canada and the United States. Otherwise, it won't be seen as credible.
Yeah. Well, President Zelenskyy said that if we keep talking about foreign troops in Ukraine, then we need something like 200,000 troops to make difference in the war. Donald Trump, if I'm not mistaken, called numbers from about 60 or 70. That is possible to send to Ukraine, if I got the information correct. Under what circumstances, from your point of view, foreign troops could start fighting against Russia? No.
We're not talking about fighting. We're talking about a peacekeeping force.
Okay. How's that different?
Well, when you said fighting, if we sent a peacekeeping force, they would be there to separate Ukrainian forces from Russian forces.
Okay.
All right. Whereas when you talk about going there to fight against Russian forces, then the NATO is taking sides on the battlefield. That's a political decision that they will never get. That's not going to happen. I don't believe. I'm not
never going to happen.
I'm not going to say it would never happen, and I'm not against it. I'm just saying it's very unlikely because that would require such a political decision, and of course, it would require NATO to have been attacked. So, try to keep the language correct.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is a peacekeeping force that would be needed to ensure compliance with whatever agreement was made. All right, and to punish violations by either side. Now, the size, you don't know the size until you know the mission. Okay?
Yeah.
If the agreement is to create a zone of separation between Russian and Ukrainian forces that stretches all the way from the northern border down to the Black Sea coast, okay, that's 500, 600 kilometers, and it would have to be wide enough, 30 or 40 kilometers wide. Now you're talking, that's probably 200,000 troops. If it's a force that is only a tripwire or some observers, that's a much smaller force, but also a much less effective force. The force has to be something that will convince the Russians that we are serious and that would prevent them from violation.
So I wanted to ask you about Russian army. So lately you said that they have some difficulties and they have crucial losses on the battlefield. Could you clarify it for me and for our audience, because it doesn't look like they have a lot of losses, because they keep fighting and they keep moving forward.
Well, I don't agree that they just keep moving forward. I mean, in 1 year, they have not been able to go from Avdiivka to Kursk.
Yeah.
In 1 year, that's 60 kilometers. Okay, so keep in context what they've actually done. As far as the losses that they have sustained, of course, the Kremlin doesn't care about the loss of their own soldiers, but the fact is that they need reinforcements from North Korea. They need ammunition from North Korea. They need drones from Iran. They need parts, components from China, because they can no longer do it themselves in Russia. The vehicles that they're using, I mean, I see reports every day about equipment that is my age or older that is being brought to the battlefield now because all of the modern equipment has been destroyed. And it doesn't seem to me that Russia has the ability to produce adequate amounts of new equipment. Russia also does not seem to have the ability to stop Ukrainian drones from hitting Russian oil and gas infrastructure. The Russian Navy, where are they?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not even a part of the battle anymore. So I don't want to overstate what Ukraine is doing to the Russians, but I think that Russia's ability to keep doing what they're doing is not endless.
So to sum up, the strongest thing and the strongest part of Russian army would be a huge number of troops and potential soldiers?
Well, they will always have the advantage of mass, but of course, they are reluctant. It seems they are reluctant to recruit in Moscow and St. Petersburg because they don't want to have funerals in the streets in those two big cities, which means they have to keep bringing in unlucky recruits from out in the more ethnic regions of the Russian Federation. I just don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't know that they have the ability to just continue. And by the way, having bodies is one thing. Having trained soldiers and effective units, that's a different story. And I don't get the feeling that they have a real strong training base with quality sergeants and officers that are training new troops. It's just, they're just pushing bodies into the fight. And when I see video of Russian soldiers riding in golf carts and civilian vehicles in an attack, that tells me they do not have the ability to punch through and then exploit, to overrun, which is what their grandfathers did in the Great Patriotic War. Of course, they would break through the German defenses and go 60, 70, 80 kilometers. I don't see the Russians having that ability.
And I'm speaking about the negotiation. Of course, we would need some security guarantees from our partners, and only under that circumstances we could make any kind of a peace deal with the Russian Federation. So, from your perspective, what should they be, these security guarantees, and who should provide them?
Yeah, Ukraine should be in NATO. That's the only real guarantee, is NATO membership. Unfortunately, the Biden administration failed to do it, and now the Trump administration has not given any indication that they would support that. And if the U.S. doesn't support it, it's never going to happen. There are other countries also that are worried about it, but without U.S. pushing it, it's never going to happen. So in the absence of that, then, Ukraine, of course, has already demonstrated that it can stop Russia. And so so Ukraine's best security guarantee, other than NATO, is to reform, modernize, and grow the size of its own army, continue to grow its defense industrial capacity. It already is growing during the war. And I think continue to work closely with other European partners that are willing to provide capabilities, even if the U.S. fails to do it.
Yeah, we have some success in unarmed, not unarmed, in
industry.
In this industry, and but it's too hard to make it really fast because of the, I believe because of the past, and because of we were the part of Soviet Union, and we had the Soviet army, and the army is the organism which doesn't want to change, or doesn't want to change fast, and our army should be changing, and we have a number of units which changed a lot. But still, the recruiting system and recruiting program doesn't work as fast and as good as we want it to, and we have some difficulties with mobilization. From your point of view, what could we do better in recruiting program?
Well, the government has to earn the confidence of the population that women and men who join the military will not be wasted, that they will not be sent to the front until they are properly trained and properly equipped, and that if something were to happen to them, that their family would be taken care of. I think that right now you've got too many different. You've got some brigades that are good and people want to go to them. Then you got other
Yeah.
brigades that have a negative reputation. And so this is the job of the government, I think, to earn the confidence of families that, no matter where your son or daughter or brother or uncle goes, they are going to a good unit. Um, and the training is really important. And having quality officers and sergeants who are veterans with experience, having them do the recruiting and also doing the training, I think would be helpful. I don't. I don't think it's appropriate for outsiders to tell Ukraine that you should lower the recruiting age. That's a choice for Ukraine. That's not for outsiders to say. And frankly, there are millions of Ukrainian men and women who are fit and that are already military age that are in Ukraine but avoiding service, or that are here in Germany or Poland or Romania. The government has got to encourage them to step forward.
So if you say that it's not
I've only got like 3 more minutes. Okay.
okay, sure. Then the last question: if you say that it's not for foreigner to tell about the mobilization age in Ukraine, then why do we keep hear these statements?
Okay. I can't tell you why people from the Biden administration or the Trump administration comment on it. These are excuses. But you know what? Ukraine should not listen to that. The government needs to focus on their own population. Why do you have Ukrainian men that are military age that are avoiding service while the country is fighting for its existence? I think that Ukraine could make much better use of women. You still are decades behind in getting the full benefit of a female population that is strong, fit, tough, determined to fight, but they're not being used that way. And I think so. You have Ukraine's problem is not people; it's that you haven't got enough soldiers. And I think Ukraine has to do a better job of tapping into the population that already is there, not changing the age limits or whatever. And I mean, I see Ukrainians all over the place in Germany and Poland. They're there. They need to be encouraged, not grabbed, encouraged to come back to Ukraine. This is the job of the government.
Okay, sir. Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you for your answers. Thank you for your opinion, and I hope to meet you again in this studio. Thanks a lot.
I would like that very much.
Thanks for all our viewers for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to write comments, and don't forget to press the like button. That would help us to show this video to as many viewers as possible. So just to remind you, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, a retired United States Army officer who served as the Commandant General of United States Army of Europe for KSDU Media. Thank you.